Have you ever scrolled through succulent pics, saw a plant that had the same name as one of yours but looked quite different? There's a few reasons why the same succulents can look dissimilar. I get this all the time when I sell succulents at the markets. People see some of my plants and say, "Hang on, I have this but it looks nothing like yours." In this video, we'll have a look at why succulents that are one and the same species or a hybrid can look like different plants and, in part, how to manipulate them to look a certain way. Exposure to sunlight can greatly affect a succulent's appearance, and here's a good example from my own garden. This is Sedaveria starburst in a spot where it gets good sun exposure for most of the day. It is nice and compact, displaying good amount of color. This is also Sedaveria starburst, but in a more shaded part of the garden. It still gets bright light, but only a couple of hours of sun. Let's do one more. This Crassula ovata red coral is in full sun. The colors are very intense. You can see just a tiny bit of green. In a bit more shade we have another red coral. The difference in sunlight is about 4 hours. This one loses out in the afternoon due to all of these bushes and is a little more green because of it. It still looks very much like a red coral though. But look what happens to the shape and color when the red coral is almost completely shaded by other plants. Part of this red coral grows under a Westringia bush and doesn't see much sun. It's almost all green and the leaves are more open and spread out. The part that's not covered by the Westringia has a bit more color to it. Sun exposure equals brighter colors and compact growth. In the absence of sun, succulents are likely to grow more leggy, some will completely lose their shape and grow from the middle, and most will grow a shade of green or light blue. Succulents grown in a lot of sun can look completely different to their counterparts grown in shade. Genetic mutations in succulents can happen naturally and can affect shape, size, color or flowers. They can be random or due to stimuli in the environment. Some of the more well-known mutations in the succulent world are variegation or cresting, but there are many others too, like color change in the following plant. Here I was growing a bunch of Echeveria rubens that were identical, but one of them has decided to not grow fully red, only the edges ended up coloring up. And this is what it ended up like versus the other rubens. Quite a difference. Mutations can happen at any stage of plant's life and can be the reason why one plant can look nothing like its siblings. Mistakes and incorrect names are incredibly common in the plant world, and they've exploded when COVID came along and succulents became super popular. I remember going on eBay one day during lockdown and seeing all sorts of common succulents being sold under different made-up names and passed on as new hybrids at ridiculous prices. I'm not sure if the people selling these plants just didn't know any better or if it was done on purpose. I'll try and give them benefit of doubt. But it's not uncommon for even big production nurseries to be selling same plants under different names, though it isn't always their fault. Let me give you an example of how this happened to me and explain a bit how plant production works these days. While many succulents are still produced the old-fashioned way, especially by smaller growers like myself, I'd say that the majority of plants that you buy nowadays are grown from what's called tissue culture. These here are Aeonium Mardi Gras I've grown from tissue culture. They have been produced in a lab under sterile conditions using growth-stimulating hormones and other media. They are also identical, disease-free and no worse than conventional plants, if not better. And this is what tissue culture looks like. The tiny plants in these containers are completely sterile, there's no bacteria, disease or pests, and they are pretty cheap to buy. It takes me 6 months to a year, depending on the type of plant, to grow these into sellable products. While I bought these from a local Aussie company, the plants have actually been produced in Asia and imported in. The lab that produces tissue culture, wherever they may be in the world, is responsible for giving an accurate name to the plants. And as you may have guessed, it sometimes isn't all that accurate. There were many occasions where I've ordered tissue culture and the plants that came in were labeled incorrectly. But often it is impossible to tell until the plants have gotten much bigger or have produced a flower. I once ordered Echeveria colorata, but when the plants grew up I realized what I've actually got was Pachypedum diamond. The little babies looked like they could be colorata, but it became apparent it was a totally different genus later on. Thankfully I realized the mistake, but I can see how these things can fly under the radar. The type of potting mix you use for succulents can greatly affect how they look. For instance, the Echeveria Romeo in the front is planted in completely different potting mix than the bigger Romeo just behind it. The color, size and shape of these two plants is different enough one could think they are two different succulents altogether. An interesting thing is that these two Romeos are identical succulents and once looked exactly the same. They are both grown in the same greenhouse, but the bigger plant is in succulent potting mix and bigger pot, while the smaller Romeo is in super well draining potting mix and I've kept it in a smaller pot. Just these two things have made one grow a lot slower, more compact and more colorful. Both these succulents are Echeveria Black Prince. The one on the right is a different color because I've not repotted it in a while, which is stressing it into a deeper shade of brown. When succulents are repotted, they may sometimes lose color and grow a bit on the greener side, even when exposed to enough sun. Regular watering can affect how succulents look color, shape and size wise. As an example, here are two Echeveria bambardis. The left one gets watered regularly while the one on the right is severely underwatered. Lack of water will trigger a stress response in succulents and will usually make them slow their growth, lose a bunch of leaves and make them more compact and colorful. The winter months and cold can change a succulent's appearance a lot. This photo was taken in the middle of winter, but just 3 months prior, this Echeveria raindrops did not have any bumps on her leaves and was just plain green. When I make content on both here or social media during winter, I always get a few comments from folks in the Northern Hemisphere saying their succulents look completely different. And it is mostly because our seasons are reversed. Here in Australia, winter runs from June to August. And because where I live there's hardly any frost and snow, I can leave all my succulents outdoors. This makes them super colorful and compact. They often look nothing like their summer selves. Also, when websites and online succulent stores publish photos, they want them to be the absolute best photos that will entice people to click or buy. As a result, they tend to post the most colorful, beautiful pics. These are usually of stress succulents or winter succulents. Those same plants may look entirely different during the warmer months. I guess the conclusion is that succulents can often change what they look like throughout the year based on how they're grown and the climate. These are the main reasons why the same plants can look different. And that's it for today. I hope you found this video useful, and if you'd like to add anything to this video or ask a question, you can leave a comment below. To learn more about succulents, you can hit the subscribe button or visit succulentgrowingtips.com. If you live in Australia, you can buy our plants online at fernfarmplants.com.au. Thank you very much for watching.